Okay, everybody ready? Yeah. Sorry, it seems I'm moving too fast and the machine can't code, fast enough. Seriously. So, let's start again. Welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm Andraz, Tori. I'm a CTO and co-founder at Zemanta. Today, I'm going to talk about short story about Zemanta and the second part about what good Zemanta, what the technology behind it. What we're trying to do is we're trying to change how writing happens. We think computers can help us write. But before we get there, let me start where I am. So I'm in Slovenia, and as you noticed, we had some problems establishing plane. Slovenia is a small country in Central/Eastern Europe. I'm actually more precisely in Ljubljana right now, and because people don't know where Slovenia is, we usually say halfway between Venice and Vienna. Wonders of internet communication, of course, enable us to talk from Ljubljana. Ljubljana is a lovely medieval city, which we eventually, of course, have to visit because it's really so lovely and so much of the technology is happening here. But the story started a couple of years ago when I was working for national television. I was there as a journalist, as a presenter, and I was bored. I was trying to figure out if I could do something active here. And I noticed that they are doing the closed caption for all of the shows. So for all of the shows they produce, they do all the closed captioning because they need to do it for hearing impaired. Unfortunately, on the other side, they were not publishing much content on the web from it would be kind of indexable and findable to other people. So took closed captions, ran some natural language processing through it, connected it automatically to their news site, to Wikipedia and similar, and basically with a single click created shows for them, for each show, each episode, a full web page that's findable, that's searchable. And they even paid for it, which was amazing. And of course, the first thing I thought of, let's do a startup. Here we have some crazy technology, why don't we make something useful for it? We created a big kind of event, invited all the friends together with the co-founder Christian, and said like, we're creating Zemanta. And the next thing was, of course, to sell this amazing technology for connecting text, for understanding text to other media houses in Slovenia. Newspaper, online sites, televisions, and similar. Now, Slovenia is this beautiful country with 2 million people, which means there's not much of a market here. So eventually, as we tried selling this smart technology to understand text to everybody, we found out that this really isn't the market. There's not enough pull, not enough strategic thinking, and 2 million people. So we decided to pivot. But pivot to what? Of course, to a bigger market, to 500 million people market. And we did that through a program called CTO. And CTO is basically offspring or basically inspired by Y Combinator, but done in London for Europe. The first batch was in 2007, and of course we applied. It promised 50,000 euros for about 10% of the company and 3 months in London. We said, wow, this is great. This is a great way to kind of change our direction as a company since we didn't do much in Slovenia. And of course, we also pivoted to the product. We said, we want to be making products for media houses. We'll try to help bloggers. So, after a week in London, we found out that people really are happy to help small, smart entrepreneurs, trying to help them with advice, help them with connections, and everything else. And we came out, of course, completely. Yeah, we got to do it. And before that, we managed to win this game. So we did the game, and it was happening amazing things. And we were used to Slovenia. In Slovenia, you don't have it. Either you apply for some government grant and it's really slow, get to know when it costs 10,000 euros, or you work with big companies and before they decide to hire a solution or not, to die. And And CTO was amazing team, everything was looking bad, so we were like on a roller coaster. And everything from around in business was quite fast. Well, except after we started working publishing houses in Europe. That's but anyway, I digress. First thing we, after got to know to London, we the house, and we called the friends to figure out whether we basically create team. With luckily people, it was not very hard to call and say, hey, do you fancy work in London? We have a project, it's like 3 months in London, could be paid by I pay. And most of them said yes, so 6 guys moved the first things first, how to do them and how to get fund into the company, visit lawyers, work in fancy buildings. This is the Gertie in London, one of the fanciest business buildings. 29 for first day for talk about the transaction, and then out of courtesy, offers us, the else guys can help you with, and we said, oh, swell, we rented the house, but this telecoms that we're getting at about 3 weeks. And we cannot do it without internet. We can write code. So a lot of lawyers at each other and said, no guys, we have the office here, it's going to be for other to want to use it. So we said, Elliot. And got basically this great office. And yes, like, you know, this kind of is one family of and we had great project with the beautiful people and moved here. Okay, and at that time we started asking ourselves, like, how do we do stuff? Are we do that in Ghana, a company? Do we move permanently? What and how do we do it? Is the work a flag, or does it matter the globe up? And we heard like there's this Eldorado called Silicon Valley also, and the New York publishers and so on. And we really didn't have a feeling of does it matter or not. Eventually, we found out that the word is getting better. Slowly getting better, and it's less and less important where exactly you are, but it's not entirely unimportant. However, costs in Slovenia are still a bit lower, so after 3 months, we decided to go back to Slovenia, set up a development shop in Slovenia, figure out how we're going to develop the product till the end, and at the same time establish a company in UK. Of course, we did that. We moved to Slovenia, also started buying servers on eBay, old sandboxes, went to IKEA to get some furniture, got the whole thing hyped up, and eventually we had some great moments of happiness and joy. That is until Aleš and Boštjan, so our CEO at the time and my co-founder, went to the trip to the US. Now, the first, they came back after 3 weeks and said like, okay guys, forget everything we talked about how we'll make this business run. We really need to focus on US and US alone, basically. And the next step was, okay, what now? We started, at that time we already had some European investors, and together with them we said, okay, this is the direction we'll start to look for US investors. We had to figure out what kind of presence and where. Do we go for East Coast, West Coast, and so on. So after about half a year of this fundraising and figuring out what kind of company we are, we got US investors, more precisely Union Square Ventures. Fred Wilson, as a blogger, really loved our tool and decided to invest. And that kind of made our decision easier, because as you move, it's easier to move where you already have some head start, some, we say, foot in the door. So we basically decided to take New York as our new US base. Naturally also, we decided that somebody's got to move there, somebody's got to be there more or less permanently, and that role was the role of my co-founder, course, John, who moved there in 2009. And then a slow process of building up partnerships, figuring out how business is done happened. Naturally, we eventually stumbled upon a business model somewhere in 2010, but we should have done this before. We always had this feeling, okay, we put out this tool for bloggers. First, we need a million at least of bloggers, and then we'll make money. Later on, we found out that we can actually make money also with 100,000 bloggers, and not a very bad one. So, but I again digress. Let's go back to the technology. What do we do and how we do it? Any questions before I move into technology? Hand up? No? Eric, nothing?
Don't do that.
I'm giving you a hard time.
Yeah, what's the question?
Yeah. What was the strategy?
Well, do you want to get into what that strategy was that enabled you to leverage a much smaller user base?
Can you repeat more clearly?
You just mentioned that you determined there's an approach that enabled you to leverage a much smaller user base to generate revenue. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So first we thought we really need 1 million of users, and then we'll sell a premium version or we'll sell advertising or similar. Eventually, we figured out that with a very kind of specific user base that you can target very precisely, you can sell a specialized kinds of advertising quite lucrative. So at the end, we said, well, we're having an advertising business model where we advertise content to bloggers. And then bloggers decide whether that content is valuable to them. And if it is valuable, they can include them inside their blog post. So say somebody talking about, I don't know, Paris, and we offer a picture of Eiffel Tower or a link to a tourist guide to Paris or something like that. And if the blogger chooses to include it, this is basically then amplification to all their readers. And it's not a classical banner advertising, display advertising, or similar, but something the blogger endorses. So we suggest the blogger decides whether the content was valuable, then distributes that content to his own readers. And through that, we've actually figured out that this is a pretty nice business model for us. But due to sheer experimentation, we tried many different things, but the biggest regret is that we haven't, for the first 2 years actually, we weren't really trying to figure out how to make money. And that's probably a biggest regret, because even if we started a year earlier, we couldn't really make meaningful amount of money because, of course, we didn't have this kind of user base. But we would learn how to put it in money, which then the learning curve moves year or 2 years forward, which means if we started earlier, it would be in our growth projection 1 year further now. But you know, everybody has some regrets. We're quite happy. Okay. Awesome. Let's go on. Technology. What do we actually do? So I was talking about beautiful content, what we created and how we moved around. But what is it? We're creating a personal writing assistant, mainly for others. And the idea is not to have a software where people would go and write this as a special interface, but really integrate the existing solutions in WordPress, into Blogger, into Typepad, Moodle, Joomla, Drupal, wherever the writers or bloggers currently are. And while the blogger writes, what we do is we suggest images, related articles, in-text links, tags, everything basically automatically related to what has just been written. So if I try to demonstrate it in a few slides, this is an article about Harry Potter. As this article is written, Zemanta on the side pulls up content that might be useful for to be linked to from this article or to be included in this article. And if I click on a few things, in this case, one image and two links, what will happen in next step is they will get included into the text. So you can see now the image on the right, obviously, but also on the left side, Harry Potter and Hermione is basically linked, in this case, to Wikipedia site about them. So we found those entities, we showed them to the user below the content, and user, by doing 2 clicks, linked out to Wikipedia. And of course, we support linking out to many other sites like IMDb, Music Brains, Amazon for books, of course, homepages of companies, Crunchbase for startups, and similar. So we try to keep this knowledge base as broad as possible. And we, on the other side, we take images from sources like Wikipedia, like Flickr, Creative Commons. So we're very, very sensitive about copyright, only images that have some kind of permissive license to be used. On the other hand, we also pull out interesting related articles, which you can see on the bottom right, which is articles from Pop Sugar, MTV blogs, so from both big blogs, small blogs, everywhere. And there is one article that's here actually promoted, and that is how we make money. We suggest articles to be linked to bloggers, and we get paid for it. A bit like, I don't know, AdWords, contextually connecting, in this case, content, not actionable ads. Any questions about what we do? Like, is this kind of clear? Yo, please.
So can you use Zemanta in the SEO, can you adjust the links to promote your own sites?
Yes, so for the blogger, the value of Zemanta is utility. We also automatically get links from the blogger. So if you're a blogger, your past posts, the posts you have written before, and automatically surface them whenever you find you write about similar topics. You can also add your own blog. So if you have like 10 friends, or you feel like linking to specific authoritative blogs, you add them to your personal list of sources, and we can then surface those as related articles. On the other side, we also promote kind of linking out. So we believe that the best content is the content that gives value to the reader, and sometimes that means sending reader away to an authoritative site. Yes, next question.
Okay, 2 quick questions. For the blogger that's trying to generate revenue, you mentioned earlier, prior to the technology part, revenue for the blogger, if they take one of your suggestions and write about it or post it on their site, is that set up, that revenue model yet? And then the second question is, how is video being played? I write a lot about video, and I use video on my blog a lot, so those are my 2 questions. Do I need to repeat them? Okay, first question is the revenue part on how the blogger makes revenue from submit text. Okay, and then the second part is how is video playing in your technology as well.
So we're having some problems hearing you clearly. So next time, Tim, if you can repeat the question, it would be awesome. Now, the first part, if I understood correctly, was how can we help blogger make revenue?
Right.
And right now, we don't really try very hard with that. We hope to have some features in the future about that. But right now, the blogger can, of course, enter his own affiliate ID. So when we recommend a link to a book on Amazon, we fill in automatically his own ID. But that's about the only thing we do for monetization for the blogger. The rest is mostly utility, the same way as search is a utility. And hopefully we'll offer some more features, like being able to write for brands, or being able to kind of write sponsor posts or similar, where bloggers will be able to earn money. I haven't quite heard or understood the second part of the question.
The video.
Oh, videos. So we did a lot of experiments with whether bloggers would want to include videos in this way. And we found out that no, they don't. What happens with videos is usually you see a video and you go and blog about it. And you start it, you include it into your blog post, and then you write your comment about it or something similar. And usually it's not that you write an article and then say, hey, this is a great video that will supplement it, and I'll just put it. When you want to write about a video, you start with it. So when we had videos in this, testing them among images, very, very few people actually used it.
Hi, I've got two questions. Are you doing anything to help the blogs be found by other search engines? And are you keeping a history of what the user, what you suggested on which of those items, the pictures and the links, whether they've linked, what they've linked on, and helping when they, as they use it, allow them to show them items that are more likely for that particular blogger to choose?
So I start with the first question, whether this helps search engine discover the site. Of course, a link from the blog that has been chosen editorially, so not automatically, but shown up or validated, says yes, this is the right link, will of course be found or followed through by the crawlers. And yes, in that regard, we help a bit. On the other side, you ask, what do we measure? What do we kind of take notes of pictures which people is chosen? And right now, what we can see is we can see which recommendations were used at the end, of course, because the blog gets published and we can read from the blog what the blogger actually used. On the other hand, we of course measure and have analytics over what we have recommended, like which sites we're recommending the most and similar. We currently are doing the personalization of like this blogger prefers to link to TechCrunch instead of Panda Daily or vice versa. But we hope, of course, to get to that point in the future. Right now, we simply say, hey, give us a list of sources you feel comfortable linking to, sources you follow or you feel are good, and then we'll recommend more of the content from those specific sources. We think that we kind of are figuring out what really makes bloggers link out, and it's mostly whether they feel the site is authoritative enough. That's like the most important thing. Having a brand, so Blogger recognizes it automatically as the right outgoing link.
One question about copyright. Can you say a little bit more about how you ensure that the matching material is, you have reasonable copyright, you're adhering to whatever copyright protections apply? Sure.
So there are basically two things. One is the related links, the index links and tags, and there are basically no copyright questions. We simply suggest a link and the link is paid. That's not a problem. Where the problems could possibly arise are, of course, images. Images are much touchier subject, as we've seen recently with Pinterest. And of course, what we do is we say, we will only use sources of images that provide some kind of license information, and those licenses seem permissive enough to be used by bloggers. So in this case, let's say Wikimedia, so this is the store of images from Wikipedia, and then we say, okay, these are the images that bloggers can possibly use, but even with that, with every image, we spell out what its precise license is. So it's up to the blogger to decide at the end whether something can be used by him or not. We can just surface it, tell this image is on Wikipedia with this license, but cannot kind of make a decision instead of the blogger. On the other hand, with Flickr, we of course have a filter or have a query to just pull out Creative Commons licensed images or public domain images in some cases. And again, we display exact license, and the blogger can then decide whether he feels comfortable with that license. But we don't take any, we cannot make any guarantees basically on the side of the blogger or on the side of the image author. Sure, go ahead.
Andraz, just to skip back 2 questions to the gentleman over there. So if a blogger uses Zemanta and does link to articles suggested, does that blogger's post become eligible to be suggested to other bloggers?
So we generally automatically include a lot of bloggers into our network. So if the user is a Zemanta blogger, we will automatically crawl it. It will not go, of course, automatically into this bucket of content that we recommend to everybody, because it might be low quality content, it might be a spammer or something like that. We kind of monitor and only include them into our bucket of content, the users that are kind of valuable content. On the other hand, we do kind of rank the ones that are using Zemanta slightly higher, but not by much, because the really core is to recommend good content, not to push someone's specific content. Sure, any more questions? No, okay, then we can go on. So, some statistics. We have about 80K bloggers monthly. This number might seem kind of low, but we really don't report like registered users installed. We would have, I don't know, installs, million installs. We really care about bloggers that see our recommendations in a given month. So these are really active bloggers. And in 2011, about 1.3 million posts was enhanced by them. We have some. So bloggers can get this tool either by installing a browser extension, or installing a server-side plugin, or inside certain platforms we have deals with them, and they simply check a box. For example, on WordPress.com, blogger can go in his personal settings, say yes, I want content being suggested, and inside WordPress.com platform he gets the suggestions. So kind of go wherever the bloggers are, either browser extensions, through certain plugins, and through this with people that have a lot of kind of bloggers host. Now, how does it work? There are different bits to it, but basically it's natural language processing, where we use a big database meetings behind the scenes, and we do so-called word sentence abbreviation, those that are more technical. And then we try to do that to link out to Wikipedia, Freebase, IMDb, I don't know, Amazon books, and similar. Behind also the categorization, name, entity recognition, and on the other hand, to connect them together, so data sources from other sites, we use information retrieval, and for that, we use system software. This is basically a server built on top of the Steam, but instead of using like the standard kind of indexing, use our own features extracted with some tools which I'll get to in a moment. This is like very, very course-break pipeline. The article gets seen on the left side. We analyze it with the use of background knowledge base. After we get this different lenses through which we can see the look into the article, we do a semantic search where we have text content on the web, so big blogs, small blogs, other sites, and output of that, and all the statements can be content suggestions. We do kind of text understanding. So machines aren't yet there. The real text understanding is there yet, but with some tricks for a lot of use cases, and we did right is one of them, text understanding can work today. It starts and here are the basis of what our assumptions were when we started with the whole thing, which are a bit different assumptions that both other similar technologies have. So the first one is input is meaningful chunk of text, not just keyword, usual with search engines per phrase, but really we try to enter the whole chunk of text and then give related paragraphs. It's not a talk, it's like an English text. Now, the problem is it's not really English text. What you might believe that blogosphere writes in English, it's not really English. It's checklist, it's English, it's everything but proper. And I'm emphasizing that because a lot of these text understanding technologies have their roots in enterprise marketing, where they were analyzing, let's say, business news or some other kind of almost formal news where you knew that a professionally trained journalist writing that proper English, upper set forms and everything, and you can rely on that to a certain degree. On the other hand, blogosphere is much more whatever works for people, and it's much more wild. So the from the get was meant for island web. Also, all of these solutions started for this specific purpose, analyzing international news or go to history, something like that. On the other, we wanted to kind of work for all kinds of spheres, from news, celebrities, entertainment, politics, gardening, anything. And really, this kind of thing that the end is do differently. Going into, I have a few slides going to more detail, not too much, so don't. This is what we do is we try to collect that background knowledge into our own database of meanings. That meanings might include topics, entities, concepts, and they are gathered from all around the web. We don't want to curate or write our own. We don't have thousands of editors writing in every company on earth, but we want to kind of use open or semi-open sources, pull them into one unified database. And for each thing, we have to know, of course, a lot about how it's linguistically used, what are its semantics, how it's connected to other things in our database. And this gets to be quite a big database of 150 gigs of this semantic data, and then kind of optimized and processed in 7 gigabytes directly in RAM. Of course, everything has to be in memory for this to work really fast. This is kind of analysis pipeline. I won't go into details, just kind of showing it to you, starting with like these really standard methods, extracting unknown phrases out, extracting the entities out, then kind of evaluating very, very surface features like casing, sentence chunking and similar, and then going to a bit more demanding algorithms, specifically CPU intensive. So you really need a lot of CPU power to kind of analyze chunk of text against so much background knowledge. So you need to say, okay, this 1 kilobyte of text and this 7 gigabytes of background knowledge, I need to connect all this somehow and figure out what in this text really makes any sense. At the end, even taking into account semantic coherence. So if you have apple and I don't know, peach, then apple probably has bigger probability of fruit than being a recording count. On the other, and Beatles in sentence might be apple recording. All this information, what makes sense for what is stored in that specific database. As this analysis happens, we then have specific entities. So we know that apple in this sentence means Apple records, or Apple in this sentence means Apple computing. And we index information. So for each article coming in, so while we're indexing, we do the same analysis as for the article coming in right now, and then we can compare those meanings to find the most similar articles. We're connecting all that by indexing blogosphere and media sphere. So we're indexing it into our own live text. But the difference is that usually you query like with a word or explore your index. What we do is query with a very complex queries of like 50 terms, describing the input article, trying to match to the most similar article currently in the database. And there's a bit of black magic there, both in terms of how you create this kind of queries and how you run fast. Because it's very different to run queries for singular versus different. Of course, keeping step out this is fun. We try to do it automatically, and we also sometimes have some students hearing about this is basically clicking through and saying, hey, this is bad, this is bad. So we kind of get a data set which our algorithms can learn. Probably like from the algorithms and systems that are accessible to the public, it's probably one of the best related content kind of engines out there. Of course, I need to think so, but it's pretty awesome. And right now, we're working on integrating social signal in these ranking decisions. So basically figuring out that something that has more retweets or likes is probably more relevant as long as the content is similar. On the other hand, we're noticing interesting things so that you cannot just use more retweets or more likes. You need to use features like more likes than articles on that site usually have, or more retweets than that author usually has. That usually means the article is something special and it's good to recommend it. And we're doing some research in this area and soon deploying it into our API and into our engine. So we do all this pretty deep analysis of content, and we do it for this tiny use case of bloggers writing blogs. And this is a bit crazy, right? Why would you do all this technology text understanding just for that? So somewhere on the way, we decided to open up the API, open up all these things that we do on the background, analyzing content to everybody that wants to use it. And the results were pretty amazing and inspiring. Especially in terms of not getting what we expected. We really optimized for bloggers blogging, and some of the use cases from the wild really surprised us a lot. So, for example, by now you all know cloud, of course, but in 2008, 2009, when they approached us to use the API, they were pretty unknown. And I was saying to the guy, like, you know, you're using us to analyze tweets? This makes no sense. We always optimize for at least a paragraph of text. It makes no sense to analyze tweets with our technology. It was not optimized for it. And Joe answered, well, yes, okay, that's what you said. We just tested out 5 different APIs, and from all of them, none worked perfectly. Yours worked best, so we're going to use yours. He said, okay, what are you, the customer, right? So eventually, they used it for a couple of years. Mid last year, they actually rolled out their whole science team and did a specific version for them of their own algorithms, and so they're not the user anymore, but I like to say we kind of helped them get started with the analysis. On the other hand, we found like clients like Lonely Planet, who is connecting their kind of forums, so content being user-generated, with the premium content about science, points of interest, cities, and similar. And Small Demons, analyzing whole books, so text of the books, to find objects, items, so different books that talk about the same object. So during the period, like, what are all the books that have Eiffel Tower mentioned somewhere, or certain historical figures and so on. So a lot of different use cases popped up that we would never have had resources to kind of attack, and never had really imagination to attack. So this is kind of wonderful way for you as an author of the technology to see it used in a way you never imagined going to be used in. So we're quite happy, even if it brings, of course, also some revenue. But back to reality. One slide is missing. Here. Some takeaways. So, accelerated experience that we had with Blockchain is awesome. And I have to say that I'm thrilled to see so many accelerated programs on all sides of the boat popping up, and I hope that they're going to enable a lot more entrepreneurs to kind of compete on this global, almost flat market. And it's really wonderful to see how is getting played, how easier to between, even if you're in the valley, and you probably have a similar in the New York scene kind of rough thing, but it's really wanted to kind of have some balance. But the trick is on the other hand, driving a lot around. You get the feeling that yes, things are green, but it will never be completely flat. There will always be like, if you need publishers, you go to London. If you need some hardcore, I don't know what kind of platforms and technology, probably Silicon Valley. If you need something, you're always going to these places where it needs to be. I much prefer to speak to you live, of course, that big experience would be much better. But yeah, I can digress and think like you really big conglomerate countries. I think it actually two things make it like an entity. One of them is of course a common currency, hopefully to stay that way. And the other is really EasyJet and Ryanair, like two cheap airlines that enable connected all the people. So it made it affordable to really single common or supercomputer. So technologies are going to expand further and further, and I'm thrilled to see how entrepreneurs are going to flatten the whole. And tomorrow is what we could have done different. We know we would start as students, as I said. And not learn, but to learn how to do it. It's really get to know properties, how it might behave, even before you have the full product ready to solve. And I realize where our markets. My co-founder spent most of his time now in New York. This couple of weeks he's here in Slovenia, so that's why he's not presenting. But probably we're going to keep our main office out in New York and like West Coast time, and we spend some time here, of course, because all our development and engineering is here. And there seem to be many markets left to innovate. And that's, I think, the wonderful news today. That there are so many things that are going to happen that are interesting. I'm a techie. I don't just care about sharing photos or something. I care about like solving harder problems with technology and seeing what's happening with Siri, seeing what's happening with Watson beating people on Jeopardy. See Google Glass. These are like the technologies that really qualitatively can change humans. And all three of them that I mentioned are in the space of smart computers. Computers assisting humans in ways or through interfaces which we haven't been used to. And the amazing increase of CPU power and communication is going to enable many more services that are personal assistants. Of course, in different spheres of life, and I hope we will have an ultimate personal assistant for writing. And that's it for me today. And now we're open for any more questions.
Thank you.
One, three, any questions?
Hi. I was looking at your list of sources that you used for the data. and I was wondering whether the fact that you left Google off the list, was that a business or a technical decision?
Why we left Google out of the list, you say?
Yes.
Well, actually we haven't quite. Freebase has been acquired by Google. So technically we're using one of the Google sources. Now, on the other, so for just to digress a bit, Freebase is a great database by a company that was called MetaWeb. They basically decided to put all facts into one huge database, all facts about the world. And somewhere in midway they got bought by Google, I think a year and a half ago. And now this database is still free, and Google is working hard on putting more facts and more entities into that database. On the other hand, the question is usually how easily accessible is data, how easily it is to integrate it with our existing databases, and of course, what's the license? And basically, we don't really do queries to those sources. We actually integrate large chunks of information into our index. So I don't think Google would be willing to kind of give a chunk of index out for us to kind of index ourselves. So on one way, we're using Google in part. On the other hand, Google isn't really very fond of exposing the raw data. They kind of expose the services, but not the raw data beneath them. And we really need raw data to do this.